Welcome to DunnWise Perspectives, a podcast about stories of resilience and shifting mindsets. I'm your host, Doris Dunn. My guests are leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday people who've navigated change, faced uncertainty, and discovered new ways of thinking when life didn't go according to plan. If you're navigating a season of change, feeling stuck, or simply curious about how small mindset shifts can lead to meaningful progress, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another edition of DunnWise Perspectives, the podcast. I am so excited today to have Andrea Davis on the show. I met Andrea, probably 10 years ago, and we were both advocates of the American Red Cross in Los Angeles. I believe you were on the board, and I think I was on a committee, and I was the director of community relations for the corporate job that I had, and encouraging them to donate more and more money to the Red Cross because I believed in it so much, and I still do today. And I am on the Nashville board. But I was so impressed with your story, Andrea, and your resiliency initiative. I know that you are the founder and owner and president of the Resiliency Initiative now, and you're going to tell us a little bit about that. But your work in disaster recovery, I could have listened to your stories all day long. They were so amazing and impressive, and I've loved getting to know you more and more over the years. And then when you came out with your book and I realized how much you had overcome to get where you are today, the story is even more powerful. But before we get into all of that, I would love for you to take a moment and introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you so much, Doris, for having me here. And I so remember when I met you all those years ago in LA, and you were very much the kindred spirit. And I saw so much of me and you, and getting the opportunity to hit that pavement to get other people to support the Red Cross. At that time, I was with the Walt Disney Company, and much like you, trying to get company and individuals who worked for Disney to support the mission of the Red Cross. And I was able to take that when I left Disney, and I got an opportunity with the Walmart Corporation and moved to Bentonville, Arkansas, and served on the board of the Red Cross. I'm actually still serving on the board here. But 4 years ago, as you mentioned, I stepped out from corporate America and money and security and started my own company. And it's been an unbelievable adventure. I have an amazing team to start the company. I stole two of my team from the Disney side of the house and then two from Walmart. And we hit the ground running. And we our work, especially, I would say, on the public sector, supporting very rural communities with hazard mitigation planning, has been my real gem and sweet spot, and designing training programs to help individuals who might be leaving government service or military service to go into the private sector and do resiliency planning or risk, security, whatever lane it's under, helping develop training on that, and launched an academy series, and which kind of pushed me to develop a 501c3 of my own under my company so I could give discounted rates to individuals, especially right now. We're in a little bit of a tough moment on the government side as far as funding and resources. And if I can support those trying to at least up their professional development in a time when they can't do anything or get any money, I wanted to do that. And I've gotten a lot of joy out of that too.
Oh, so amazing. So on resiliency and disaster recovery, again, you have some amazing stories. Tell us the beginning and how you first got into that type of work and what inspired you just to stay in that lane of disaster recovery and resiliency.
Taurus, I completely fell into this field. I didn't know it existed. And so if we go back in time to 1999, you remember the world was ending. It was Y2K.
Yes.
People were prepping before this word of preppers was even like known to us. And it was because we were concerned that computers couldn't understand the number two. And so I was in law school at the time, and it was not my calling in life. I decided to drop out of law school. It's my second year. I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm hitting the pavement looking for a job in old school classified ads. And I see this advertisement for a nonprofit that was funded through the city and county of San Francisco's Office of Emergency Management to do continuity of operations planning for the city's nonprofits. Individually, I knew what those words meant, but I had no idea what this job was. What the heck is continuity of operations, or COOP in the biz, they say. And so I was substitute teaching at the time. I had kindergartners and fourth graders. I also knew that was not my calling in life. And so I was just like, okay, I'm interested in this job. I don't know really what it is, but I was like, I'm going to make a pitch. And so my whole pitch to the hiring manager was I was teaching small children and I didn't kill any of them. And I figured that's part of this.
Oh
So
my God.
I got a laugh out of him. And it's a gentleman who's still one of my mentors. His name is Luke Canton. He was the director of emergency services for the city. And I got the job, and what he told me, and it's words that have resonated with me through my entire career. The job of the emergency planner or emergency manager is to coordinate and facilitate subject matter experts to solve a problem. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating.
Mhm.
And the problem can be a small thing. Water main break can have a significant impact on transportation in a city, or a really bad day, alien attack, Y2K, or more likely, earthquake. I'm in San Francisco
Mhm.
at this moment. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. It's my job, right? Is to herd all these cats together and get people to talk. And so I was very thankful the world didn't end. And I got to really learn my new community and going door to door and helping other nonprofits support their mission by talking them through what are their critical functions, what do they need to stay doing what they do to serve their clients, and then what are the resources they need if there was a disruption, and how and when would the city step in, or how and when can they support the city. It was amazing and fascinating. I'm so glad I got my roots there. And I went from that into the federal government. I was the emergency manager for the Federal Reserve. And after September 11th, the field becomes a little bit more formalized. There was a requirement for every federal agency to have an emergency manager on site. However, it wasn't really defined what that looked like. It really came out of building evacuations. You need to get people to a safe place, not really rooted in kind of the planning in which I had got my roots in. But then went on to FEMA and supported Hurricane Katrina recovery work down in New Orleans, in getting to be part of one of the US's largest recovery efforts post the Civil War with Hurricane Katrina was amazing. To see an entire state come back from absolute devastation and to play a small role in that was super cool. I just love that. And
Don't sell yourself short. I think it was a lot more than a small role that you played after Katrina.
it's a lot of folks were there, and having the opportunity to tell the story behind all the great work that was happening, and some of the not great work. And why was it not great work? Because people were not synergistic. They weren't asking, the different layers of government weren't asking individuals what they needed to recover
Yeah.
and how to rebuild their community. And what came out of that absolute devastation was the post-Katrina Reform Act, and that helped define of, no, we need to approach this differently from a national, state, and local level, and bring that synergy in, because it makes zero sense to rebuild, at least what we saw in post-Katrina. Why would we rebuild segregation era schools? Why would you
Yeah.
do that? They weren't built for the amount of students that were going. They weren't built in hospitable environments, flood safe, or any of the safety protocol. But if you have rules and regs like the Stafford Act, it ties the hands of someone who's trying to build a recovery effort. Unless it's 51% damaged, the facility or whatever it is, you have to use what you got. You can't demolish and rebuild. It makes zero sense. Why would you invest in it, especially after a
Mm-hmm.
hurricane or a flood? You have things that you may not be able to see, like mold. We're seeing a lot of that in Los Angeles now with the post fire, the environment
Yeah.
with the smoke and everything. It's one thing to have fire damage, it's another to have smoke damage, things that you see, it's the stuff that you can't see.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be a secondary disaster. And to learn all that, to see all that and experience that. And I really feel when you referenced my book before, of the kind of the stories I put in there, was I wanted to share, it was obviously from this lens of how my personal journey and how I was doing all these different kind of amazing work and these amazing experiences to participate in. But it was always that drilling it down to that individual or that moment. If you take the lesson, and it could be crap. There's some crappy stories and there are bad things that happen. But if you can learn this lesson, what am I supposed to be being taught by this horrible experience? And
Mm-hmm.
then parlay that into something. And it may not be at that moment, it's a positive thing. And whereas in any of the jobs that I've had, sometimes I had to leave because I felt that I had no way to move or grow, and or it was just a bad environment. And then you amplify that to a crisis or a disaster and a community recovery. It's taking all those individuals in that moment in time and seeing if they can change and rebuild and do something different, which is
Yeah.
unbelievably hard. And I think that's what attracted me to this work, Doris, is that I enjoy a challenge, but with something like this, it's always changing, it's always dynamic, and you never know how the onion seems to be infinite, right? You keep pulling back the onion, it keeps going.
Yeah, yeah. So I do want to talk about your book. And I mentioned before we hit record that I read it 2 years ago and then I read it again in preparation for this call. And it's called I Only Remember Grievances and Desserts: What I Have Learned from Cretins, Douchebags, and Vipers So Far. Obviously, that's a very intriguing title. And as you read the book, and hopefully some listeners will want to pick up a copy of this book and learn some of the lessons themselves. They're not all, it's not limited to men. There are
Oh
a lot
no.
of bad men, but we talk about the vipers. I think the vipers are all female in here, and the douchebags and the cretins are the males in here. And you had to overcome some pretty tremendous challenges because people didn't see you seriously. They didn't take your abilities, your experiences, your thoughts seriously. And I know that we continue to have those challenges of women trying to compete in a man's world and women not making the same amount of money. But some of the stories that you share, they're pretty, they're huge. And you're getting books thrown at you, you're getting spit upon, you're getting some of the terrible, I can't, we talked about before the recording, maybe people say things behind our backs, but some of the language that was used to your face was amazing. And the fact that you stayed in some of these places and you overcame some of these challenges. And I know some of that started very young. You overcame a tremendous challenge when you were just 18 years old. And can you share about that and having to work through the high school administration and maybe how that helped you become the strong redhead that you are and
See,
able to
Doris,
overcome these cretins and vipers and douchebags?
yeah, I totally agree with you, Doris. I've had the benefit of having bad things happen to me pretty early on and learning that lesson of it's how you look at it at this moment. And that lesson you take is what's going to set in motion your next steps. And I feel fortunate. And I graduated high school. I was 8 months pregnant and I chose to stay in school. And I had great marks. I had won the county literary festival, the county festival. I was one of those overachiever students. It was a shock to say the least when I was pregnant. And the fact that I wouldn't go to one of those schools where girls like me go to, so I didn't go away. I was a visual sign of, you know what? I've made my decision. I'm owning my decision. And it was a really quick learning. People don't like that.
Where did that come from? Did your parents support those decisions? Did they push you forward into making those bold decisions that you weren't just going to comply with what everyone said that you were supposed to do? Where did that come from inside of yourself?
To be honest, Doris, I don't know. I think it came out because of this experience. I was so young in the sense of, this isn't right. I deserve to graduate with all of my peers. These are my friends. Now that I'm going to have a little buddy, I never saw it through the lens that my life was over. But I was always that kid in the sense of, hey, this isn't right. I remember I went to Catholic school through K through eighth, and I would highlight sections of the Bible where I said, Sister Carita was wrong. That did not go over well. I was always like that in the sense of calling out the wrong.
Mhm.
And I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten more strategic of when I call out the wrong. And in the examples I gave in the book, I was doing what I thought was right, my job, or whatever the specific thing that led to it, always gotten to this point of, wait a minute, I don't accept this. This is not acceptable behavior. This is not how you treat anybody on this planet. And you reference the male female dynamics. That's why I felt very serious about making sure that I articulated my experience with women in the professional settings as well, because I was under this misimpression that we were all in it together. We should support each other. And when I had two really bad experiences with individuals, one I thought were friends, and I call that
Mhm.
the BFF Piper, or the Queen Bee, who was the mentor female, who spit on me. In the workplace. That's been my entire life. If you walk away from anything from reading the book, is that if you see something that's wrong, call it out.
Mhm.
Because just by my very presence of graduating high school, going back to that early lesson,
Mhm.
I called out people, and people don't like it. It has to be something that you're willing to stand by. Being uncompromising in who you are and what you believe in, that's what gets you through every day.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson I learned. And I was so thankful that it came out of me, Doris. I've always been this person. And in fact, only fights, like physical fights, which I know isn't unladylike, as I was told in Catholic school, is that over protecting somebody else or saying, you can't be doing this. I was president of the Model UN Club in college, and someone was burning the UN flag on UN Day. And so I went to throw water on it and got in a fist fight.
My God.
To me, a series of, this is absurd. I'm going to call it out, and I'm going to write this book about this, because does this happen to other people?
I think the difference between you and other people might be that people shrink back, that they don't stand up. Maybe they believe the same thing. They knew that was wrong, just using your UN flag. They might have come to that same interpretation. This is wrong. But rather than taking the water and being willing to go into a fist fight over it, they walk away and just shake their head saying this was wrong. And I think it takes a different type of person willing to stand up for others and willing to take on that role. And I love the fact, so in your book, you talk about integrity and the importance of integrity and people first. And when I looked at your website on the About page, I loved the core values because I looked at the core values and it mirrors the book. It mirrors everything that you believe in, your authentic self in the book, and it's people first, empowerment, resourcefulness, curiosity, and integrity. Those are the things that you clearly believed in your entire life, and you have brought those forward in every role that you've ever played, whether it was at FEMA, at Disney, at Walmart, the Red Cross, or the Resiliency Initiative, or being on a high school stage 8 months pregnant. You bring that same integrity, that same authenticity, that caring about other people and calling out the wrong. That has always been you. And I think that's why I have always just been so impressed with you and admired I want to be your BFF in a good way.
you, Doris. You have been such a champion of me. And that's why a lot of the focus on the book, you can take it of, I'm hoping people walk away with the sense of reflect on this moment, because everybody has bad things happen to them. And you may be in a position that you can't do anything about it. You have a bad boss. If you know your why and what matters most to you, you can get through anything. You seriously can get through anything. And it may be a path to get out. Maybe you can't walk out the door today because you got to put food on the table.
Yeah.
I worked at Denny's graveyard shifts as I was going to school when I was a young single mom. I was so grateful that I was able to have a job that I could go to school, raise my son, and make money. I did not want to be a waitress for my entire life, but I kept on. What did I need? I needed money to, so we eat. I chose to step out and raise my son by myself. And so I needed to fund that choice. And just knowing that, being very clear and put whining aside, I have spent a great deal of my life feeling sorry for myself and whining. This is wrong. This shouldn't happen. This is ridiculous. All can be true. It serves nobody.
Yeah.
Go back to why you're doing something. And if you don't know why, stop. Stop. Whatever it is, stop it.
And we're just releasing control over what you don't have any control over.
Yeah. And I would think, Doris, that's one of my biggest lessons that I have learned. And I think it may be as I get older, I truly believe I can save the world and change the world for a better. And because I have seen when you put positivity out, if you put gumption, when you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can do that. And I'm fully aware the playing field isn't even. I get all that. But I feel like I can be that force of nature. But learning that, okay, maybe pick your battles, maybe be a little bit smarter. Like my favorite boss that I've had, Mr. Threat, who has a chapter in my book in the good category.
Yes. You don't name any of the bad characters. You only name the good characters. I love that.
Only name the good characters, because the bad characters don't deserve a name as far as I'm concerned. But the good ones and the mentors that I've had, and Joe Threat, and he helped me start my company. He's been a great mentor, but he would always, when I left federal service, public service to go to Walt Disney, he just told me, he's just, watch the doors that you kick in. Watch the doors you kick in, because they're going to swing back and hit you. And what was that advice? What was he telling me there? It was just choose your battles.
Yeah.
Because I was chasing the windmills till I went to Disney, and that I really had to learn a different approach. This was a whole new environment, a different language, even professionally, being an emergency manager and working for Fortune 500, the world's largest entertainment company. I spoke a different language. And so I was having to adapt. And so I think that's big personal takeaway that I've learned through the years. Yes. No, take on the challenge, but maybe be a little bit more strategic in how you get there.
Yeah, I once had a boss telling me that I sometimes behave like a bull in a china shop. When I latch onto an idea, I want to move forward. No one's going to tell me no. And like you said, pick your battles. You need to figure out who the audience is. And in this case, these were senior executives. And when they said no, you've got to find a different way. If you still want to try to get to that yes, you've got to find a more strategic way to get to that yes. You're not going to bully your way. You're not going to kick that door down to get that yes, because it's just going to turn them off. You've got to be a lot more strategic in how you do that. And the next time I had a meeting with that same group of people, I had heeded his advice and I was a lot more gentle. And he came back and said, all right, you get it. That's good job. That's how you do it. You were a lot more strategic in that, and you said things in a more efficient way where people were going to listen. Because that's the other thing. Kicking in the door, a lot of ears close immediately when you kick in a door. And you got to figure out how to say it and how to get that yes in a more gentle manner, especially if there are cretins and douchebags and vipers involved.
Yeah. And if you're walking into a hostile environment, which I still feel that way. I've approached every environment that I'm walking into. They may not want me there, or I beat somebody out for a job, or whatever the baggage that may be brought to that table by somebody else. And just going back to, what do I need to accomplish here? What's important to me, and how do I need to deliver that
Mhm.
so that it's productive? Because if something that I've taken away, as I've been actually working on the second book of a takeaway I've learned, if I were to go back and do anything, and some of my approaches with those douchebags and cretins and my vipers, was to take on the responsibility to de-escalate, to
Mhm.
be the one to have that courage to take it down a notch, because that is a big strength. If you hit force with force, something will give. In a corporate setting, it's always the person who has the more power
Yeah.
and more money. They're the ones that are going to win. And I forgot what was important about taking the person on. It came about being right. That wasn't what was important. And it was a big message when my leadership wasn't supporting me. And in the sense of, you know what, I can't change a perspective of a multinational company.
Yeah. Give us some insight on this book coming out. What would you have done differently? Give us an example of a situation that you handled, and maybe if you looked back on it today, you would have handled differently.
So this new book, so the first book has, it's all about my baking and desserts, especially
Yes, I want to get to
about,
that in a second.
and that was my coping mechanism. And this book focuses on how to live an extraordinary life. And it's my recipes for brunch and happy hour, which are my two favorite meals that I have. When I was 8 and I was taking on certain issues at school, and how I would approach them, doing little sit-ins and sharing how I took those experiences, which led to me being an adult. But as I was writing this book with the different vignette stories, there was a theme of, I could have stood up more. I could have done more. I could have helped more. And where I would always deviate from that was when I would get into, this is so wrong. I need to just full on charge and take down this person. And it becomes more about an individual than it becomes about the why I was doing it. And that's why it's just going back to what I've been saying with you, Doris, is that you have to remember why you're doing something and
Yeah.
investing it, because it's life's so short. In the second book, I share some stories about friends I've lost way too young, and to the worst one, it's suicide.
Mm.
And when you were standing by someone, at least you thought you were, and being their champion, and completely missed the mark for a cry for help.
That's got to be so hard. And I have lost people to suicide as well. You don't see those marks until afterward. You didn't recognize them as marks when that person was alive, and when you could have done something, you didn't recognize those marks. And so you definitely cannot blame yourself for that. Could you have really seen that? That's the question. Hindsight's 2020. You can't recognize that. Even if you went back in time, you might not recognize it again a second time, because those signs
Yeah.
only become obvious afterward.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Doris. I lost a friend in high school, and then one when I was a little older. And this now, with more seasoned eyes, as I've gotten older, didn't even enter my thought
Mm-hmm.
process that would be possible, that someone at that young age could be going through a trauma and not recognize it, because I'm looking at the world through a filter. And they're looking through the world through a different filter.
Mm-hmm.
The world is so different with social media and everything being so different than what I grew up with. And just being attuned to, I haven't checked in with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And you're so right, Doris. I did spend a bit of time about like racking my brains that I missed something. If someone isn't communicating or isn't sharing,
Exactly.
you can't draw it
You
out. And
can't
it's
draw it
just,
out, and you don't know what's really deep, deep inside. But I love you just said when you check on people, and I know you talk about that in your book, and just asking people, are you okay, and not accepting fine as an answer.
You
And I think
can't accept
that's,
fine.
yes, I think
You
that's
can't
so
accept
important.
fine. There's no more subjective word than fine. I actually hate the word. Especially if you're in a leadership role, wherever you are, and even in your family, an environment where people feel safe to say they aren't fine.
Or
A
maybe
lot of
if
times,
they,
so busy.
yeah, as a coach, you're trained to say, tell me more. Maybe when someone says, I'm fine, the response could be, tell me more,
Yeah. Tell me
and
more.
demand more of what does that fine word mean to you today, at this moment, this hour? I don't believe that you're fine. So tell me more about how you're saying fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you.
All right. I want to get into the cooking and baking, and that you use that as a coping mechanism. And you have some amazing recipes. I love the names of some of the recipes in the book, and they are creative. That's the other thing I love about this book is you bring humor throughout the book. These are some serious situations that happen, yet you bring in some really fun humor into it, and things like pity party bourbon bread pudding. And you include in the recipe that ripping apart the bread really is therapeutic. I really like that. Or didn't your mama tell you never piss off a redhead? Cinnamon buns. Or killer karma caramel, or killer karma caramel chocolate cupcake. Say that fast 3 times. But you have all these great recipes, and I really need to try some of these recipes. They sound amazing. So tell us more. And you mentioned this Betty Crocker. I have one of those old cookbooks as well. And it's how I started to learn how to cook, because I lost my mom when I was 14. And I learned a little bit how she cooked, but I think I learned a lot more from the Betty Crocker cookbook. But yeah, share more on how you learned to cook, or how you loved to learn, or how you loved cooking.
Started back this first story I tell about my graduation experience and graduating 8 months pregnant, and people saying horrible things as I'm walking to get my diploma and throwing things at me, and just awful. It was awful. Here's a happy moment, and that people tried to take away from me because I was having a child. It's still so bizarre to me, like when you look at it from a logical standpoint. I went home that night as I was 8 months pregnant. I wasn't going out to the graduation parties, and someone had given me a Betty Crocker cookbook for graduation. And I decided I'm going to start cooking and teach myself how to cook. And one of my favorite things on the planet is chocolate truffles. So I flipped to that recipe and I cooked it. And as I was going through the baking process, and especially with truffles, because it's making them and putting them together, but it has to be very precise. And with baking, I noticed my focus. I stopped feeling sad for myself because I was
You were
making these truffles.
present. You were present in cooking and baking.
And it really became such therapy for me. And so throughout my whole career, anytime I had a bad interaction or something bad happened, I'd create a recipe. I'd find different recipes and then I'd create the ones that I have in the book. And the more complicated, like the cinnamon buns, cinnamon rolls are hard to make because of with yeast. And the more complicated is really how bad the situation was, but it helped me walk through it. And so and that's why I shared the recipes, because it became such a tool for me to deal with difficult situations. And they're freaking yummy. Not only is the process fun to make it, and a lot of mine, as you see, have liquor in them. So you can drink the liquor, dump it in the recipe, and then you get a cupcake or something with your bottle, whatever.
I love it. So, for our listeners, if someone finds themselves in a toxic situation, and you found yourself in those toxic situations many times, what are some pieces of advice you could leave for someone that might be facing that situation?
Really know to react in the heat of the moment.
Mm.
Obviously, if you're in a life-threatening situation, that's different. To get yourself someplace safe. Use the get yourself someplace safe for emotional safety as well. Value that. Get yourself out of it as quickly as you can, as professionally as you can, if this is happening in the workplace, and reflect. Don't react, reflect. Write it down. That super helps me, like just to write down the situation, look at it, tear it apart. And if it's someone's like personally attacking you with words, look at the words. Do you agree with any of them? Any of them? Anything that was said? If the answer is heck no, don't give any headspace to this person or this situation. But what you do need to do is figure out how you don't have a repeat in this and what's the best tactic. Sometimes it's going up the chain of command. Through the stories I shared, I did not have much success in that. So it became more on me of I need to respond to this differently. And to me, what always worked was being very direct. So if it was, I'm getting called out in a meeting or someone just wouldn't even let me speak, having that courage to say, I haven't spoken in 5 minutes. We have 20 minutes left. I'm going to start my presentation now. Almost stepping in and doing that. That is not a subtle call out. It's being very clear that, hey, you are not letting me do XYZ. This is my job. And so starting to showcase the situation and just really giving yourself the kind of the baby steps that you need to have the courage to fight this, for lack of better words. And I hate to say that for the work, because the workplace shouldn't be like this.
It shouldn't be, but it is. And I love the example that you give if someone steals your idea, because you sometimes have that, especially for women. They share an idea and people ignore it. And then 30 minutes later, usually a man will have the exact same idea and everyone says, oh, it's brilliant. You had a great comeback for that.
It out and just say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you loved my idea, that you're going to run with it. And I really want to share that these were the 3 people that helped me come up with it. And this is where it came from. I don't know if you remember that movie Working Girl.
Yes, that's exactly where my head went. Exactly where my head went, on the elevator. Yes.
And that it's going to happen, because if someone is insecure in their spot or they got the heat on them and they see something, they're going to try to take your being, your confidence. And that's been my experience my whole career. My biggest threat was who I was, my confidence. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do a darn good job of it. And so don't let them take it. No, embrace it. Oh my God, I'm so glad you love my idea. Turn the tables on it. Don't let them take it. You can't go back to your cubicle and whine and feel sorry for yourself. You will get trampled.
Yeah.
It's not right. It's wrong. But if you don't stand up for yourself, no one's going to. If you don't support you, who's going to support you?
Agreed. Totally agreed. All right. As we wind down this conversation today, are there any questions that I didn't ask that you wish I had?
No, I've just loved this conversation, Doris. And I hope that any of the stories that I share, and just even by doing this, that I have given folks the strength they need to take on whatever they're having to deal with. And if it's that really awful day, you're not alone. There's so many people out there that want to support you. You know me now. I'm very present on social media. I will always help you. And even if it's just to talk through, hey, this happened to me. Hey, direct message me. I'm happy to talk through it and share what I did. And sometimes it's sharing, oh, don't do that because this was bad. Might help you. And remember, laugh. Like you said, you have to find the humor and the bad and make them characters. Make these people characters in your story. They became characters, and what the full title is what I've learned from them.
Yes.
And I'm here today because of those experiences.
Yeah. If we can walk away from that and all the bad experiences that we have and use it as a lesson. And there's so many times, so many examples I can give where I get frustrated or angry or upset. But if I could step back away from it just for a minute and look at it as, what can I learn from this situation, no matter how bad it is? And even if the lesson is, I need to leave this work environment, or I need to go to HR, whatever that lesson might be, figuring out what the lesson is and not having a pity party, not just being angry and upset and dwelling in those emotions, and instead making sure that it doesn't happen to someone else and that we protect ourselves and that we can move forward and learn lessons and grow from them and even start major international companies that help with resiliency initiatives that help make the world a better place.
Yes. Everybody's got it in them. Don't let them take what makes you special away. Believe in you. And like you said, Doris, you might have to throw yourself a little bit of a pity party, make a cupcake or make something, but then move on.
Then move on. That's the important thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you again for joining me on my podcast today and reconnecting. It's been too long since we had a conversation. So really happy that we were able to reconnect. And I look forward to many more reconnections. I know you just said you had an employee that moved nearby, so maybe we can grab lunch or coffee or dinner or a glass of wine or maybe baking some brownies together at some point in the near future.
Let's bake some brownies and tell some more stories.
I love it. I love it. You have an amazing day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening or watching this episode. If something from today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to share this episode with someone who might need it, or take a moment to reflect on what stood out for you. You can find show notes wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoy the podcast, subscribing or leaving a review helps more people find these conversations. Until next time, keep learning, stay curious, and remember, sometimes a small shift in perspective can change everything.